Subscribe to our channel and give us a like if you want to find out how love, intrigue, and the struggle for power are intertwined in the fate of one of the most famous women in history. Cleopatra was not just the queen of Egypt. She was a master of manipulation, knew how to influence the destinies of empires, and left behind a legacy that still inspires admiration and debate to this day. But what lies behind this image? How did this woman, considered a symbol of beauty and power, embark on a path that could lead not only to glory, but also to tragedy? Immerse yourself in a world where every step on the throne is a game of survival. Few could have imagined that from the dark corridors of the Egyptian palace would emerge a woman capable of shaking the entire known world. Cleopatra VII was born in 69 BC into a dynasty that once ruled over a powerful Egypt. But her beginnings were far from ideal. The family whose throne she was destined to rule was mired in political intrigue and betrayal. The Ptolemaic dynasty. Greeks who came to Egypt after Alexander the Great's conquest ruled Egypt for a long time. But with each generation, their power became more and more unstable. By the time Cleopatra entered this world, Egypt was on the brink of financial collapse. Her father, Ptolemy XII, turned out to be an unsuccessful ruler who not only became indebted to Rome, but was also forced to seek help from the Roman Republic. This arrangement, where Rome dictated its terms and Egypt became a political satellite, left the country vulnerable. And so, when Cleopatra became an adult, her father died, and the situation on the Egyptian throne reached a critical point. She was to rule alongside her brother, Ptolemy XIII. But this partnership was only for show. Her brother turned out to be too weak and unable to control the country. Cleopatra, in essence, found herself trapped by her own family and on the verge of losing power. But she wasn't ready to give up. At 18 years old, she was determined to seize all the power for herself. In this world of betrayal and struggle for the throne, Cleopatra began to plan her moves, knowing that there could only be one ruler on the Egyptian throne. And despite her youth, she had to find a way to survive in the political game where every move could be fatal. It was then that she made a decision that would change her fate forever. She sets out for Rome and meets Julius Caesar, the greatest Roman general of that time. Why did she choose him? How did she convince this powerful man to support her claim to the throne? What was her purpose in forming an alliance with Caesar? We'll reveal all of this in the next part. After Cleopatra decided to put her trust in Rome, her fate ended up in the hands of Julius Caesar, one of the most powerful men of his time. However, in order to catch his attention and win his support, she had to use not only her political courage, but also her charisma, intelligence, and strategic thinking. Rome, more than anyone else, understood the value of an alliance with strong rulers. And for Cleopatra, this was a chance to free Egypt from Rome's oppression by turning it into a powerful ally. When Cleopatra arrived in Rome, her actions immediately became the subject of speculation. Apparently, she had no intention of just being a woman in the background. She wanted to become the Queen of Rome. But what was behind her decision to meet Caesar at his house, to stage this meeting as something more than just a political message? She used her education and political intuition to win over both Caesar's heart and mind. According to rumors, when Cleopatra first met Caesar, she got into his house not just with military or political proposals, but with a genuine determination to change the balance of power in the Roman Empire. How did she manage to convince him to support her ambitions and invest in her rule? Some historians believe that their relationship was a political marriage, where love and power were intertwined in an endless game. Or was it really like that? Caesar, for his part, was an ambitious man and a master of politics. At that time, Rome was in a state of war and political crisis. Cleopatra's support could provide him with new resources and an opportunity to strengthen his position in Egypt, which also benefited Rome. But this was not just a struggle for political power. It was a true clash of ambitions and ideals, where two worlds, two great rulers, faced off on the battlefield. Not only Caesar, but also the Egyptian aristocracy saw Cleopatra as a threat. Many doubted that her alliance with Rome would bring prosperity to the country. But Cleopatra herself, understanding that her people and her kingdom could survive only through such a strategy, gladly accepted the challenge. And she made Rome look at Egypt in a new way. When Caesar helped her restore her power, Cleopatra began to rule Egypt as an independent monarch, and her alliance with Rome became so strong that she managed to secure her reign for many years to come. However, behind this alliance were not only political benefits. A genuine bond was developing between Caesar and Cleopatra. It is said that their relationship was more than just political, and over the years, their union became a symbol of mutual dependence and political power. But what happened next? How did this alliance affect the fate of Egypt and Rome? And what price did Cleopatra pay for the support of the great general? We will find the answers to these questions as we continue to explore her life and the strategy that led to the incredible twists in her career and destiny. After Caesar returned to Rome, Cleopatra returned with him. Her influence on Roman politics was becoming increasingly apparent. An alliance with such a powerful ruler as Caesar not only strengthened Cleopatra's position in Egypt, but also significantly elevated her status in the eyes of the Roman aristocracy. As a woman, she managed to forge a political alliance that turned out to be incredibly beneficial for both her country and Rome itself. However, with each passing day, it became increasingly clear that this alliance between Rome and Egypt was more than just a political deal. It was a game of fire, where both sides knew that such a relationship could lead to great changes. While Caesar was consolidating his power in Rome, Cleopatra was focused on developing Egypt, strengthening its economy and armed forces to prepare the country for possible challenges. Caesar and Cleopatra became the symbol of a powerful alliance. Cleopatra gave Caesar a son, Caesarion, who became her potential heir and a symbol of her authority, as well as Rome's. This was an important step, since at that time Rome had not yet achieved political stability, and the figure of Caesarion could become the key to further strengthening Egypt's influence on the Roman political stage. However, not everyone in Rome was pleased with this alliance. As soon as Caesar returned to Rome, his political opponents began actively criticizing his relationship with Cleopatra. In Rome, people couldn't understand how someone could so easily fall under the influence of a foreign power, let alone accept a woman as a partner in such an important alliance. Was Cleopatra merely a lover, or was she truly a master of political maneuvering who knew how to manipulate the situation and outsmart Caesar himself? People began searching for answers to these questions not only in Rome, but throughout Egypt as well. Soon, political unrest broke out in Rome, and the fate of Caesar and his alliance with Cleopatra was put in jeopardy. His ambitions to make Egypt an ally of Rome, rather than its vassal, caused considerable tension among the Roman aristocracy. Even those who supported him in the political struggle began to wonder what would happen to Rome if the alliance with Cleopatra became too powerful. It was at this moment that a new enemy of Caesar appeared on Rome's political stage, Gnaeus Pompey, who began making plans to regain his influence in Rome. Pompey saw Cleopatra as a threat not only as a woman, but also as a symbol that Rome was beginning to lose its independence. This was not just a confrontation between two great men, but a clash of two worldviews, the old Roman Republic and the new order that Caesar was trying to create. After returning to Rome, Cleopatra and Caesar grew increasingly close, but the political tension only intensified. The Romans were not ready to accept that such a powerful woman from Egypt could effectively become the ruler of Rome. And all of this was happening against the backdrop of Caesar's own ambitions, as he sought to establish absolute power in Rome. Caesar, despite all the warnings, could not let go of this idea. He was already planning to expand his influence and make Rome the most powerful state in history. And in this regard, an alliance with Cleopatra, who knew many secrets of diplomacy and international relations, was a strategic move. She became not just a woman, but a symbol of a new era that threatened to destroy the old political order. How will this story end? Will Cleopatra ultimately be able to win in Rome's political game? Or will she be forced to face its destructive power? And what consequences will her relationship with Rome have for her kingdom? After the death of Julius Caesar in 44 BC, Egypt and Rome found themselves at a crossroads. For Cleopatra, the loss of Caesar was not only a personal tragedy, but also a huge political threat. She lost her powerful ally, and her future was thrown into question. However, despite these challenges, Cleopatra once again demonstrated her strategic brilliance. A struggle for power began in Rome, and new players emerged on the political stage. The strongest among them was Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus. Unlike Caesar, who was open to an alliance with Egypt, Octavian had a completely different policy. He saw Cleopatra as a threat and as a symbol that Rome was losing its independence and dominance in the Mediterranean. Octavian decides that it's time to put an end to Egyptian influence over Rome once and for all. Cleopatra, however, was not ready to surrender. She begins to look for a new ally, and that ally becomes Mark Antony, a general and politician who was once Caesar's ally, but now found himself on the side of Octavian's opponents. Cleopatra saw Mark Antony not only as a strong political ally, but also as someone with whom she could restore her influence and strengthen Egypt. Their alliance was in many ways unexpected, but extremely powerful. Mark Antony himself was an ambitious and determined commander. Cleopatra, on the other hand, was an experienced diplomat who knew how to turn weak positions into strong ones. Together, they became one of the most powerful political forces of their time. Meanwhile, in Rome, Octavian continued to build his power and strengthen his position. He couldn't afford to see Egypt as his enemy. And the decision was inevitable: war. However, Octavian couldn't just attack Egypt outright. He knew that his troops had to defeat Mark Antony's armies before he could truly take on Cleopatra. The conflict between Antony and Octavian reached its peak in 31 BC at the famous Battle of Actium. This was more than just a battle. It was a fight that would determine not only the fate of two men, but also the future of Rome and Egypt. Cleopatra and Mark Antony stood against the might of Octavian, who was already poised to become the sole ruler of Rome. Before the battle began, Cleopatra and Mark Antony desperately tried to unite their forces and stand against the Roman enemy. However, despite their determination, the battle did not go in their favor. The Roman army claimed victory, and the fate of Egypt was sealed. Mark Antony was defeated, and as a result, his troops suffered a crushing loss. Octavian emerged as the victor, and Cleopatra's fate was sealed. All she could do was try to save Egypt from total destruction. When messengers brought news of the defeat, Cleopatra realized her kingdom was on the brink. At that moment, she made a tragic decision not to let herself fall into Octavian's hands and become his captive. Her alliance with Antony had collapsed, and she made a decision that would shock all of history: death. Mark Antony, also realizing his fate, took his own life. It was a tragic end for two great figures whose ambitions and passions led to the downfall of everything they had built. After the tragic deaths of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, Egypt finally fell completely into the hands of Rome. Octavian was now in full control of Rome. He decided to make Egypt a province of the Roman Empire. This move marked the end of a great era of Egyptian independence, and the civilization that was celebrated for its wisdom, art, and myths lost its independence forever. When Octavian entered Alexandria and took control of the palaces and temples, it was not just a political act, but also a cultural blow. Egypt was absorbed by Rome, and its power now became a symbol of the Roman monarchy, which was gradually entering a new phase, the era of absolute power held by the emperors. Egypt became just one of the many regions of the great Roman Empire. But despite Egypt's ultimate fall, the memory of Cleopatra did not disappear. Her name became synonymous with power, charm, wisdom, and determination. She was not only a woman who led her country, but also a woman who tried to preserve her culture and traditions in a world that was becoming more Roman with each passing day. Her entire life became part of a myth about how a woman can manipulate great men and political systems to achieve her goals. So, what remains of Cleopatra? To many, she is remembered as the lover of Caesar and Antony. But her political activity and strategic thinking often remain in the shadows. She knew how to form alliances, manipulate situations, and, most importantly, maintain Egypt's independence for a long time despite pressure from Rome. Her determination to preserve her power in Egypt and her ability to control external forces remain examples of political cunning. Her relationships with men like Caesar and Antony were much more complex than just romantic affairs. These alliances were not only matters of love, but also carefully calculated political moves aimed at strengthening Egypt's position in a world full of political conflicts and ambitions. However, it's important to note that she was never just a pawn in someone else's game. She herself was a player, manipulating others and using her knowledge and skills to advance her country. This wasn't just political mastery. It was the art of survival and ruling under constant external pressure. Cleopatra's death marked the beginning of a new era for Egypt and Rome. Egypt became part of the Roman Empire, and Rome entered a new phase of its existence, gradually transforming into an empire where power became absolute. But the memory of Cleopatra, her struggle for the throne, and her life, full of intrigue and passion, remained in history as a symbol of how a strong individual can change the course of events.